Hello and welcome back to the Gallowgateshots YouTube channel, where we have a special episode for you, the mid-season review. We're 19 games in and we currently sit in the top four, with us being in the semi-final of the League Cup. So I think it's fair to say it's been nothing short of eventful. I'm your host, Joe, and joining me tonight are Iain, Scott and Matty. Lads, how are you doing? Thanks for joining me tonight.
Yeah, I'm good. No problem.
Yeah. So I kind of want to start this off by really talking about a time before a ball had even been kicked, and that is the summer transfer window. So just to jog your memories, we signed Botman, Target on a permanent deal, and Nick Pope early on in the season, as well as signing Isak later on after the season had started. We also had quite a bit of a clear out. Dubravka went, Fernandez went, Hayden went, just to name a few. So it was quite a bit of turnaround after we survived last season. The pre-season we had was really good. Obviously, we went to Austria. Miggy was bang in form. We did lose against Benfica, but we did have strong results against Atalanta and Athletic Bilbao. So, Matty, I want to come to you first about this. So, what were your feelings going into the window, bearing in mind the incredible January window we had, the way we finished last season? Were you optimistic, and what were your expectations?
Well, first of all, Joe, I'd just like to say I'm sorry for not replying or responding when you said how I was, asked how I was there. Everyone went a bit quiet. I don't think anyone knew how to answer there, so Iain just took charge. So I'm very well, Joe. How are you? Are you all right?
I'm very good, mate. Looking forward to doing this with you.
Very good. But in answer to your question, obviously it was a roller coaster ride from January to the summer. We did a lot of business in that January, very unlike Newcastle United, but needs must. Brought in some great players, some shrewd signings, and they obviously galvanised the team and helped us stay up very comfortably in the end because of some ridiculous form. So going into the summer, I personally had a bit of trepidation, because I just thought, are people going to expect us to do the same again? Are people going to expect us to sign 4, 5, 6 players? And I just wanted to sort of think, if we could carry that form on from last season, then maybe we don't need to have wholesale changes. You're right, we need to get rid of some of the dead wood, and that dead wood's still lingering about a little bit. As much as the players that have done a job for us in the past, they're still out on loan, and we're just trying to get them off the wage books. But I was hoping for 2 or 3 signings that would make a difference, and as it would turn out, we made 2 or 3 signings that would make a massive difference. So what we ended up getting, I was very happy with. I know there was plenty of people who thought we were still light in maybe the wide areas, or our squad wasn't as capable as fourth in the league at Christmas would make you think it was. But yeah, all in all, I was happy with the summer business, and I was thinking 2 or 3 in, and that's what we got.
Brilliant. Iain, given who we signed, do you think that we perhaps lacked strengthening any one particular position? During the pre-season, a lot was talked about that right wing position, but as I sort of mentioned, Miggy was in such good form that it seemed that was maybe not necessarily the priority going into the season.
Yeah, I think that was probably the one, sort of all the polls that floated around where people said we need strengthening. Like you said, Miggy had a phenomenal... I thought he had a really good end of the last season and carried that on to the pre-season and obviously into the actual season. I think he definitely is there on merit. I still felt at the start of the season we were light in the wingers positions, just in terms of depth, but it would be a case of, if you were going to sort of sign that marquee signing, would then the likes of Miggy Almiron, Alan St. Maximum be okay with being sort of, in effect, a backup player? The big one for me was Sven Botman. Obviously, there was talk about him going to AC Milan, and that didn't look like it was coming to fruition, and we've ended up landing. And I think at time of recording, I don't think he's lost a league game yet, and I think it's something ridiculous like 11 clean sheets. Twinned with Nick Pope as well. And to be honest, as much as I think Nick Pope, at the time anyways, was a good keeper, I was thinking it might have been a little bit underwhelming, given that Burnley, I think, had just got relegated. And yes, he's been in the England setup in and around the England team, but I was thinking, possibly naively, and thinking, could we do better than that? But I'm completely glad to be proved wrong, because he's possibly one of the best signings that we've ever made.
Yeah. Scott, so Ian's already mentioned this. There was a lot of surprise when Pope came in and Dubravka. And to be honest, there wasn't actually people weren't really sure who would start, whether it be Pope, whether it be Dubravka. It really took until the Forest game to get a little bit of a confirmation about that. Do you think that, as Ian said, do you think that that position is something which we sort of maybe took for granted, thinking it was okay, and we just thought Dubravka could hold on for another couple of seasons?
I think it was something that we obviously did need to upgrade, but I don't think it was top of the list. I think there was other areas in the pitch where, we'd heard from, Eddie and everyone before the season, just like, look, I think we're trying to calm expectations a bit, saying, look, we haven't got an unlimited pot of money like everyone thinks. We're not, and even like, quotes of, we're not the richest club in the world, and yes, we have the most money, but you're not the richest club because you can't spend because of financial fair play. So when Nick Pope came in, one, it was completely out the blue. There was no ITK on the planet who saw that coming, and I think it was within 24 hours it was signed, sealed, and delivered. I do think maybe looking back at it and what happened with Dubravka so soon after Nick Pope came, maybe there was a little bit of rustling within the group where Dubravka maybe was offered a chance to go to Man United, and we all know how that turned out. But I think at the time you could kind of see that that's what he wanted. So maybe they got together and like, okay, which keeper can we get to replace him? We need someone like for like or better. Who's available? Nick Pope's available. Is he like for like? Absolutely. Is he better? Absolutely. Although at the time we wouldn't know, because I think the team or the defense that he was behind beforehand, so many shots getting through. He was always up there with top number saves, but he's always up there as well with conceding quite a few goals. So you put a better defense in front of him, he turns instantly into a better keeper. And you could argue that with Dubravka would happen as well, but I think maybe something went on behind the scenes from that one. The only thing that surprised me throughout the entire transfer window was how little outgoings there was for us. I thought there'd be more. I thought there'd be a few more players going, even just out on loan. And we did a keep seller loan 2 episodes before the January transfer window started, or during the January transfer, and I think there was about 8 or 9 players on the sell list. And I think Miggy might have even been one of the players on that list, if I remember rightly. So
whose idea was
it goes
that?
to show what we what we know. But
what do we know?
Yeah,
man?
I was surprised there wasn't as many outgoings as there was. I thought there would have been a lot more.
Yeah, and it just goes to show that it's easier said than done with these kind of things. You might want to play off the books, but if no one wants them, or if for whatever reason, whether their wage demands are too high or they just don't want to leave, it's not as simple as just kicking them out the door, is it?
I think wages are a big part of it, aren't they, though? Wages are a huge part. I mean, yeah, I think the Dwight Gale move showed you that. I think the fact that he had 2 years left on his contract, and we've given it to Stoke for free, and just said, look, you put that, whatever transfer you're going to pay, put that towards his wages, so you'll move. And it's we got him off the books, and Hayden, Hendrick, Clark, all loans in the last years of the deals, because they want to get that last year on that for wages, and I don't blame them. They've been good servants. Well, Hendrick aside, and maybe they deserve that last year of a good pay. But it's much easier said than done. We all know it's not a computer game to move people on, is it?
Yeah, exactly. Right, I want to move on now to the first highlighted game of the season, and that is the very first game, Nottingham Forest. At home, huge opportunity. It's a newly promoted side. War flags are back, and it was a great atmosphere to be in. Different strategy and style to last season. We had huge possession this time, 62% to be exact. We were dominating from pretty much start to finish, and we were defensively solid. And it was also, as we've spoken about, confirming Pope pretty much as the number one going forward. So we won 2-0 in that game with Wilson and Cher getting the goals. Matty, how did you feel? How did you feel going away from that first game, given the change in style and the real domination?
Very optimistic. You had to be. We had plenty of chances that game. Forest didn't look up to much more, but you can't be really surprised given they bought 62 players and expected them all to gel together on the first day. But the way we went about it on the front foot, pretty much picking up where we left off at the end of the previous season. That was the worry, after having a summer, and we're not fighting for our lives again. Will some of the players not have as much enthusiasm as they did when they were fighting for their lives, and they answered them questions pretty early doors. Should have been more than 2-0. It did take an absolute thunder bastard from Cher to break the deadlock. But then Wilson makes it a little bit more comfortable. But you had to go away as much as it was Forest, one of the newly promoted sides. We haven't had these similar fixtures in the past, but opening day victories, they're not part and parcel of Newcastle United. So I was over the moon, and I thought we could really kick on from here. It was a positive result, albeit against a team that were just struggling to find their feet in the Premier League.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Moving on from that game, it's easy looking at the position where we are now that you would think that a lot of it was pretty much smooth sailing, but it's been anything but that. We've drawn a lot this season, haven't we? 8 to be exact, which is the joint most so far in the Premier League. Especially early doors where we drew to Brighton and Palace 0-0, Wolves and Bournemouth 1-1. Obviously, there's been, within those games, there were some questionable VAR decisions. So, for instance, like Wilson's high boot against Brighton denying us a goal, Longstaff's penalty shout against Wolves. And to be fair, with these kind of teams, we've seen it recently against Leeds. We sort of struggle to break some of these teams down, especially the low blocks and things like that. Iain, I'll come to you first. So, basically, why do you think we're struggling with these kind of teams? When it comes to teams that sort of take the game to us, we can really exploit some of their weaknesses a little bit more, but there just seems to be something missing. Are we just unlucky, or?
I think it's part and parcel is the bad decision that went against her. I think, if I remember rightly, the second win came against Fulham, and I think that was in October, which I'm sure you'll touch on in a second. But I think the reason we struggle so much is because we are used to picking, or last season at least, was very, very good, if not one of the best counter-attacking teams when Howe took over. I think at the minute, because we're still sort of almost the project that we've got and got going, and the players that are at the club at the minute, we just lack that little bit of quality in the final third where we can unpick really, really tight-knit defences. Obviously, we've got Bruno, who links up fantastically with Miggy and Trippier on the right-hand side. We've, in the last couple of months, seen the left-hand side really improve with, I think we've discussed this previously, with the fluidity of Joe Linton and Joe Willock, and they switch from sort of left side midfield and in the centre as well. But I think it's just having that real quality that can sort of unlock defences, and I think that'll come in time. Like I say, it's only it's a year and a half, less than that, into the sort of the new beginning. So I do think as time progresses and we get those sort of quality players, and we'll probably find it a lot easier to unlock defences. But take nothing away from the jobs that we've done at the minute. Like you say, we've lost one game all season, so we must be doing something right.
Absolutely. Scott, the interesting thing that we saw at the weekend was Isak coming in sort of alongside Wilson, almost playing as a number 10, being quite fluid, getting between the lines, that kind of thing. Do you think he might be that answer to unlocking those defences?
I think he can certainly help. I think we've talked about it before in the reviews and the previews we've done the past couple of weeks. His movement is really, really good, and it's really going to cause defence trouble. You could argue Isak was brought in as a replacement for Wilson because Wilson was injured at the time, and it was I don't want to say it was a panic buy. I don't think it was that. I think it was this is a player who we've got our eye on. We've been scouting for a little while. We need a striker. Let's just see which one we can get. And I think, I don't know if he was the first or the second or even the last choice in the on the list we had, but he came in, he did a job against Liverpool, and then he did, okay, you would say, against Palace, and then I think it was half a game against Bournemouth he had before he went off. And then he's come back and he's hit the ground running again with a goal against Fulham. So, he's one of those players that if you can feed him the ball, which I think we now have the players around the box who can do that, he's going to score goals. And it was nice to see him link up with with Wilson at the weekend. Because I think if we can get both of them on form, keep them fit, and get the service into them, we're probably going to see one of the most dangerous partnerships up front that we've seen, not just for Newcastle, but in the Premier League for a good few years. I think, you talk about Kane and Son, I think we could maybe look at, that level of goals feedback. I'm putting it out there. I think Isak's that good.
Bold. That's very bold.
Matty, go on, Matty.
Yes,
go on. Give us your 2 cents.
I'm not going to have a go. I'm not going to have a go. I mean, I love the optimism. I mean, and God, heaven knows I could borrow some. But I mean, just to reflect on what you were saying there, Joe, regards to the draws. I mean, it was an interesting one because it was like a weird pick and mix. I won't make sweet analogies because God knows that my bottom of the bin sweet will be someone's top tier. It'll be hell on in the comments. But the draws that we got leading up to that, that win against Fulham, it was a weird pick and mix because there was some great performances in there, some decent performances and some not so great ones. You're looking at Brighton away, a place we never travelled well to. We didn't play overly too well, but we defended fantastically and we got a clean sheet. We go to Wolves, a place we don't really travel that well. We weren't that great, but we snatch a late draw with the same maximum score on the screen. And then you get that Man City game, which was absolutely unbelievable. And then you get the two draws at home, which sort of started dampening people's spirits a little bit. And then, like Scott says, it sort of compounded it going into the international break when you start hearing news of Isak being injured for Sweden and coming home from international duty, and you're thinking, well, we haven't won a game since the opening day of the season, but it didn't really dampen my spirits too much because you could tell that we were still head and shoulders above what we'd expected from the start of last season. So it was just a strange time because there was a lot of people throwing shade our way, saying, "Look, the sort of honeymoon period's over. You haven't won since the opening day of the season." We got obviously that defeat against Liverpool, which you might touch on, but it was just a strange time because we were getting these draws, but we were getting good performances as well, especially that one against Man City.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was funny. Like you mentioned, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, that the bubbles burst sort of thing. We aren't going to be able to carry that on." But I think we could all see for the most part the performances were there. Yeah, okay, Wolves weren't great, but we still managed to salvage something. But you could see we were like literally just on the verge of doing something and breaking them down. There was just, I don't know, it was just finding our feet a little bit. Glad you mentioned the Man City game though, because I want to talk about that next. So, arguably the game of the season. It had absolutely everything. We went behind 5 minutes in. Then Miggy sticking it to Grealish, literally humping the ball into the goal. We went 3-1 up. Trippier's gorgeous free kick, and they bring it back to draw 3-3 as they do. Scott, what statement do you think that this result in this performance put out to both us as fans and then also the rest of the league in terms of what we were, what we're capable of?
I mean, there's not many teams can score 3 against City, let alone go 3-1 up against City. And there's also not a lot of games that you'd watch where you throw away a 2-goal lead and you come out going, that was mint, that wasn't it? And everyone's like, what a performance, that's great. And it was what, 3rd game of the season, I think. Like we beat Forest, we drew against Brighton, it wasn't that convincing, and then we just out the clappers straight away with this City game. And they got the early goal, and you see that early goal and you just think, yeah, we're gone. It's Man City. They're going to score 4 or 5. And the Newcastles of the past, that would have happened. We got the equaliser, like you said. through, I think it was Miggy. I can't remember who got the second goal.
I think it was
I think it
Wilson.
was it Willick or Wilson?
Wilson scored a brilliant
yeah,
goal. Brilliant.
Oh yeah, he
got us 2-1
turned the
up until half
defender,
time.
didn't he?
Volleyed it in.
He took the touch and took the two defenders out and then slotted home. And then obviously you got the Kieran Trippier free kick. I put this in the group chat just before we went online with this. If you watch Man City's second goal, the Haaland goal, and you watch the goal at the weekend that we scored against Fulham, they're almost identical. The ball's in a different part of the pitch to begin with, but the ball comes out to De Bruyne and he just whips it in first time. You know, they've changed our shape from defence, and we did the same thing against Fulham. It's almost as if Eddie Howe's taken some notes from the way Man City do, because they do that all the time. They try and break you down that way. You know, you think they're going one way, they'll have a dummy run, and then someone will whip a ball in and it'll catch you off guard. I think, though, to go back to the question, that game, it just showed what we were capable of, and it really lit a fire, I think, under the fans' bellies to be like, this is it. Like, this isn't going to be a relegation battle season. We can perform like that week in, week out. And, you know, you look at the Wolves game that came next, and, you know, I didn't think we were too bad in that game. It wasn't the best, but, you know, it was end to end. It was a nice little game. It was a good game to watch. And then you had the Liverpool game where, again, we took it to them. And it was the same sort of thing where you're just thinking, wow, okay, we've played two of arguably the best teams in the country at the time, Man City and Liverpool. I'm not going to say Liverpool are the best team in the country at the moment because of where they are in the league. But and we've took the game to them and we've almost got 2 points out of both of them. It just, for me, that just epitomised what the season was going to be. And it really got us looking forward to the future of this season.
Yeah. I remember watching it, and it was almost like everything was clicking. I know we're Drew, but against Man City, you take that, and like you said at the start, to come away from that game and think, that was bloody meant to watch. I'm not even too fussed that would drop the 2 points just because of how incredible that performance was, and if we can just be consistent and take that into the rest of the season, you know, there was a lot of hope there. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the Liverpool game there, because that came very quickly after. When we went to Liverpool, they were struggling. The only win so far that season was a 9-0 drubbing of Bournemouth, which occurred earlier on in the week. A lot happened during this game, to say the least. We got the debut of Isak, a lot of VAR controversy denying him a second goal, and you could argue that this was the first appearance of Eddie Howe's shithousing mags, which brought a lot of fume from Liverpool and the wider media. Iain, why do you think there was a lot of anger from that game from non-Newcastle fans about the way we played? Do you think it was valid, the criticism, or do you think that it was a little bit of us rocking the boat against the teams at the top of the league?
A bit of both. I think it was Harry was saying on the reaction against Fulham that he hates it when teams do to us. And many people have said we're not the first team to time waste or to use the dark arts or whatever phrase you want to turn. But I think it's a little bit of that, and a little bit of us rocking the boat. Everyone expected Newcastle, like you say, to taper off. We hadn't won since Forest, and I think it's people are getting a little bit nervy of because the Man City game, and I think very much large parts of the Liverpool game we didn't just sort of scrape or hang in there. I think we were, for at least 60 minutes in the Man City game, dominated it. Same with Liverpool. The first half I thought were very, very good. Arguably should have had a second goal to show for that. Just to start the second half. But yeah, I think it was a bit of both. I think no one likes it when teams are shit houses. I hate it when it's done to Newcastle, but then I love when Newcastle do it to other people. It's funny. But like you say, it was all to do with the big six, and I think people started maybe pricking their ears up and going, Newcastle could be a series contender here. So yeah, a bit of both. But like you say, it did come back to bite when the arse. The only thing that I'm not even asked that. Well, I am asked that. They scored in like the 90, 100th minute when there was only 5 added on. But the thing that sticks out the most is a little bit of naivety, because I think before they broke to get that corner, Joe Linton had it in the corner rather than just try and see it out. I think he tries to lace it across and get a winner. But again, that just shows where we've come. We're not. It could be naivety. It could be the fact that did we want to settle for a point at Anfield, knowing that we've done enough to win the game. But like you say, it came back and bit in the arse. But to have that as your only defeat this season so far, again, like I said before, you must be doing something right. Yeah,
no, absolutely. It goes to show the change in mentality that Eddie Howe's really put into the team. That I mean, what his mantra, his intensity is our identity, and it's just been shown time and time again. Yeah, okay, yeah, might be a bit naive to not keep it in the corner, but you know what it is, we went for it, and you can't really blame him too much for that. Right, so would anyone else like to tackle that question, or are you happy to move on?
No, I mean, Iain is right. Like, I mean, I think it was because it was against Liverpool in general, though, and we were the architects of our own downfall a little bit. To this day, I mean, there's plenty of people who say, we've only lost one game this season, but it was because there was too much extra time, and the only real controversy for me in that game was the Isak second goal. I still look at it now, that's still, and I think, I don't know how the hell, because there was rumours that the lines were drawn wrong and all this stuff, but it just looks onside to me. However, the added on time stuff, I couldn't really complain too much. It was a good punch. And I remember saying at the time, it's going to be a result we're going to struggle to get over. And we had 2 good opportunities to get over it with Palace and Bournemouth. Mm-hmm. And they were the performances that I was a little bit worried about. We get to Palace, we get Palace at home. It was a bit of a damp squib of a game, and there's an own goal scored, and we think, right, nice one, we've got 3 points here. And it was, as the Referees Association put it, a big mistake. They disallowed the goal for no reason whatsoever. They thought it was a Joe Willock push when he was indeed pushed. So that was a bit of a kick in the teeth. And then the Bournemouth game, for me, arguably one of our poorest performances of the season, and we managed to still rescue a point from that. But you know, spoiler alert, it's not like no one knows what happens next, but that's what happens after this international break is nothing short of stupendous.
Well, the period that I like to call the golden period, which is the 6 weeks in October and November before the World Cup. We only dropped 2 points. Only dropped 2 points, and that was a draw at Old Trafford. When you think about that, it's absolutely insane. And I've got the scorelines here from some of the big hitters, and I'm going to go through them, and I've got a question at the end for this, right? So just to recap, Fulham, 4-1. Brentford, 5-1. Villa, 4-0. Southampton, 4-1. And in those 4 games, we had 8 goal scorers, plus an own goal from Brentford. So we had Miggy, who scored 5. Wilson scored 3. Bruno scored 3. Wood, Willock, Murphy, Longstaff, and Joe Linton all got a goal. And that is with Isak and Alan St-Maximin injured. Scott, is this just kind of a show of the talent that we've got across that core set of players? And does it fill you with confidence that we're no longer a side that will, break down if we have 1, maybe 2 injuries to key players?
I think it shows the willingness as a team to attack as a unit, to defend as a unit, to do everything as one. We're not relying on, St. Maximin to get the ball up the pitch. We're not relying on Callum Wilson to bang the goals in. That being said, we were all had a massive twitchy arse at the weekend when Bruno went down and, it was doom and gloom. So, I think as a fan base, we still have that mindset of, well, the best player gets injured, we're screwed. We've got to, buy someone else or do this or do that, where, maybe it isn't that bad. I think I heard the commentators at the weekend say that Sven Botman was the only outfield player who hasn't scored in the starting 11, apart from Nick Pope, obviously in goal. The outfield player who hasn't scored this season. So if you think of the players that we've got on there, obviously with Dan Burn, Kieran Trippier's getting a few. You got your midfield getting a few. Fabian Schär can, obviously score a good couple of goals. Goals coming from everywhere. I mean, it's not unusual. I think, was it last season, before December, our top goal scorers were Kieran Clark and Jamal Lascelles, or was that the season before? Like we've had that where, where maybe it's not providing the play and we're relying on set pieces, whereas now we've got the set pieces down. And can I just say this season, some of our set pieces have been outstanding. Some of the chess-like moves that we've been making are out of this world, and it's absolutely great to see. And they're coming off, which is also nice. But we're also scoring from, passing, moving, that triangle that we've talked about so much about, Miggy, Bruno, and Trippier, just working all the time. And probably a good credit to some of Miggy's goals this season is down to that triangle working. We're now starting to see it on the left-hand side. We're seeing goals come from the middle. It's nice to see because it's been so long for Newcastle where, we get these midfielders in and they just don't seem to get many goals in a season. I think Iosi Perez was probably the last midfielder, if you want to call him that, who we've had who's scored probably over 5 goals in a season, 6 goals in a season. Since then, I cannot think of any midfielders who've scored more than that. Maybe St. Maximum, as is probably the one wild card from last season when he started banging the goals in. But it's not a worry anymore when you see Wilson go down because we've got backup. Last season, our backup was Dwight Gale, Chris Wood. Season before, it was Dwight Gale and Andy Carroll. Like we're getting players in to not just be in that starting 11. We're starting to build a squad out. You said at the beginning there's still a bit of deadwood. That's correct. That'll only improve over time in transfer windows. The question I always have is, okay, say we move on, your likes of Paul Dummett and your Matt Ritchies, and that's no disrespect to them, but you move those two on. Do you bring in a player who would fit that gap in defence on the bench and be like a squad player, or do you bring someone who's competing for the likes of, Kieran Trippier's place or Dan Burns' place, or you go into midfield and you're looking at St. Maxim? Do you bring a player in who's better than what we've currently got in the starting 11, or do you just bring someone in as a squad player to try and not, kind of tip the boat too much? And it's a fine line you've got to walk, and I think a lot of clubs get it very, very wrong, very, very quick. Hopefully, we don't do that.
Yeah, it's certainly a balance, isn't it? We've seemed to hit the nail on the head pretty much all our transfers, you could argue. And the harmony in the dressing room is something which the management seems to really care about, and it's shown within social media, with how they interact on the pitch. So you're right, it is a massive balancing act. Moving on from the games where we've swept a lot of these teams aside, I also want to talk a bit how we've dealt with some of the traditional top teams. Less flashy, but arguably better, very impressive defensive displays. We've talked about City and Liverpool already. Man United, we've went Old Trafford. We drew 0-0. Could have had a pen with Wilson. Joe Litton hitting the woodwork. Arsenal again recently, 0-0 defensive masterclass. Spurs went to their place, beat them 2-1, and we've had a controlled victory against Chelsea at home 1-0. So this seems to show the other side of our game where we know how to control the tempo, manage ourselves, and how to almost dictate the play and get the other team to really play more on our strengths than what we used to do in the past. So Iain, are you surprised at all at how well we've actually done against these teams, given it wasn't even not longer earlier in the year, earlier in 2022, where we were still struggling against the likes of Chelsea and that? It's been quite a massive turnaround.
It has. I remember, I think I said this possibly after a match reaction, that it's always in the back of my head when I do match previews that it is one of the big boys. We haven't conceded, we haven't been beaten for a while. Would you a drubbing? But that just never ever comes, and it's testament to the mentality and the ethos in the group of very much what the Wall Flags display said. We're not here to be popular, we're here to compete. And we've found ourselves this season doing that more and more against the big six. The game against Chelsea, I think that was Ironically, it was, I think, 10 games unbeaten at that point, where it would have been last season, but then obviously when we went to their place and got beat 1-0 in the last minute. Again, going to Spurs, where we've not had the best record. We have picked up some quite good results, but I think it was last season we got, I think it was it 5-1, 5-0, something like that, we got beat.
5-1.
And for the first half of that game, were dominated. They never sort of got a sniff. And then, like you say, Arsenal going to their place where I think they won something ridiculous like 10 games in a row. And they've scored in each one of those games, and we went there and sort of spoiled the party, which I think that's what is leading to fans of these other teams of being so salty. It's, we don't just go to these big teams and roll over or try and get a plucky equaliser in the last minute, or we'll go there and try and take the game to them. Arguably, Arsenal was different because of how well they played. We did have to sit back. We did have to defend a lot more sort of than we're used to. But again, it's a case of when you watch for week in and week out, you know that we've got such a dynamic range of performances. We can control games. We can be very, very attacking. We can be very, very resolute at the back. So, and like you say, 12 months ago against the bigger teams, we were still struggling. So it's a testament to how Eddie Howe has we're playing, and like you say, the belief in the group of players that we've got.
No, absolutely. It's shown a lot more maturity in our performances, definitely. So one thing we haven't talked about yet are the cup runs. I think we can all agree that the FA Cup defeat was a shame.
It's overrated.
But in the
It's overrated.
it's massively overrated.
It wasn't much of a run, was
it's
it?
not a real competition. The League Cup has always been the bigger trophy. Everyone knows that. But anyway, in the context of the wider season, it's not a tragedy. It was a shame, but given where we currently are, I think we can forgive them for not making it into the next round. But with the League Cup games, the likes of Tranmere, Palace and Bournemouth. Now, this is where we saw a lot more of the fringe players come in. Lascelles, Anderson, etc. And you found that the performances were a little bit more scrappy than what we used to. They're a little bit more disjointed. We've kind of mentioned that quite, on the reactions. And Matty, do those kind of games, and does this sort of I appreciate that we managed to get through, but do you think that those kind of performances just make it clear that we need a good window in the summer for better squad depth, especially if we get into Europe and we have to compete on four fronts next season? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, I think that the League Cup games, it did make it evident. It showed that starting 11, when now it's settled and they know all their patterns and all these set pieces and stuff, you can replace one or two, but once you make wholesale changes, it does put a magnifying glass on the shortcomings of the squad. Now, that was a big thing people were saying after the Sheffield Wednesday game, and I do agree. We do need some more quality in the depth of the squad, but I think it sort of was swept under the carpet a little bit because at the end of the day we were progressing in the tournament. I mean, so as much as it was evident in especially the Palace game, the 0-0, we weren't really getting any chances. Palace didn't really have any chances. I think Nick Pope made a couple of saves, but we went through on penalties and there was a sort of euphoria there because we were even winning penalty shootouts. And then the Bournemouth game after the World Cup, it was an own goal. We had a couple of more chances in that game, but still, like you said, a lack of quality. But with that being said, we did start with quite a strong lineup in that Bournemouth game. But when the changes are made, it just, sort of, like I said, puts a magnifying glass on it. Even the Tranmere game, we showed a lot of grit to come back from 1-0 in that game, and we put a different type of performance in. Like Iain said, we've made some different types of performances, not just in the cups, in the league. Sometimes we can be brilliant attacking wise. We can dig in when we have to and still get a result. But even the Tranmere game showed that maybe these squad players aren't up as much as we think they are, and as much as they try their hardest, the likes of Jacob Murphy, the quality's probably not there. Jamal Lascelles, probably footballing wise should have been gone maybe a couple of seasons ago. But that being said, he's the club captain. We went, really invested in the squad over the last couple of years before the takeover. So I can totally understand why he's still there. It's just like you say, as we progress and climb the heights and try and finish high up the table and possibly challenge for trophies, it's going to be something that we need to look at. But right now, I think it's a case of Eddie Howe doesn't want to rock that group too much. I think we said this in the summer that you just need to be a little bit careful in making wholesale changes when the character of the squad and the togetherness is what's dragged you through a lot of the tough times. So your Lascelles, your Richies, your Murphys, a lot of the people, as much as you're bringing in the likes of Dan Burn, who's made a massive impact, not just on the pitch, but in the dressing room, some of these players, these squad players who were, deemed by a lot of people surplus to requirements and not good enough, they are doing a lot for the togetherness in the squad. So I can see why there hasn't been wholesale changes. But when little cup runs, and it's been absolute quality. I mean, the Leicester game was amazing, but the little results in the cup early doors did put a highlight on the quality side of things when it comes to football. But who cares? We're sat in a semi-final of a League Cup for the first time in 47 odd years. So he's doing something right. And who am I to really begrudge that? So, I can talk all I want about the lack of depth, and we do see that evident in when we need a plan B and stuff. But we're getting there if we get players fit, and who knows what the summer will bring. But hopefully it won't be massive wholesale changes. But like you say, just small progress, 2 or 3 a window. But it all depends if we're going to be at Europe, boys. That's all.
Dare to dream.
Yes.
Right. So before I go into asking you guys about your player and goals of the season, I did ask the group to suggest some of the funniest highlights that have occurred during the season so far. So I've got a list here. Number 1, Ronaldo thinking that he scored with our free kick at Old Trafford when he snatched it off Nick Pope. Absolutely ridiculous. Adrian Mitrovic with his dodgy penalty. The Spurs away monsoon. Geordie tops were still off whilst the Southerners were tucked away inside. We had the return of the T-Rex against Everton. Nick Pope trending everywhere on Twitter, thanks to Toon Paul's fantastic influence skills. Nick Pope. Bruno destroying the referee against Leicester, and he wasn't even sorry about it. And finally, Dan Burns' Unreal Dancing live on Sky. Credit to Scott for that amazing video. If anyone who's watching does have any more that they've thought of, please leave them in the comments below and we'll be sure to read them.
I've got one.
Boys. Okay.
I've got one.
Oh, go on.
I've got one.
Go on.
Jamie, I don't think this was on television, but Leicester, Jamie Vardy, 50-50 with Trippier going towards the corner flag. Trippier sees it out for a goal kick. Vardy gets annoyed, smacks the corner flag, it comes back and hits him in the face. And the full Leeds' corner sort of erupted, and even Jamie Vardy had to turn to them and just sort of laugh his head off, even though they're getting beat 2-0. I wish they would have got it on camera, but they didn't, I don't think. Yeah, that was my favourite moment.
I'm glad we had an eyewitness account for that. Brilliant. Okay. Boys. Player, right, so I'm going to come to each of you and I'd like to hear your player of the season so far, your goal of the season so far, and if you could just give us a quick summary of where you think we can realistically go this season. Scott, I'm going to start with you, mate.
Okay. Goal of the season, St. Maximum against Wolves. Just to have the audacity to hit that ball, considering how high it came from. It was a dodgy clearance, but yeah, it was just such a nicely hit ball. I don't think anyone's saving that, and it meant so much to the result because we had that arguable disallowed penalty when Sean Longstaff got pulled back. They had the disallowed goal where he pushed little Ryan Fraser into the stand, almost probably outside of the stand when you see it. And yeah, just that strike is just. Yeah, it's just epitomises St. Maximum as a type of player he is, I think, in terms of, I think only he can score that goal because only he would take that chance. Player, this is a tough one. If we're talking off pure stats, it's got to be Kieran Trippier because if you look at his FPL, and I know it's FPL, but look at his points, he's one of the best players in FPL. And I think they mentioned on the FPL show, which went live today, by the way, that he's only like 80 points off beating Andy Robertson for the most points scored by a defender in a season. And he's only halfway through. So
That's wild.
From a stats point, it's Kieran Trippier. But personally, for me, it's Sven Botman. I think he's just been that solid rock of a defender that we've needed, but he can also pass a ball. His crossfield passing is, I want to say John Joe Shelby-esque, but I think that puts down how good his passing is, because John Joe doesn't always get it right, and I don't think I've seen Sven get it wrong yet. And also the whole thing of 11 clean sheets, not lost a game when he's been in the league. And when he signed for us, everyone thought, okay, he's going to be one for the future. He's 22, I think, so he's not going to get a start. It'll be Lascelles and share, or Dan Burn and share, as everyone thought. But I think the injury to Matty Target has been a blessing in disguise for Sven Botman to get his start into cement, and he's put those big Dutch size 11s or whatever size he's got, clogs, in the ground at St James's Park, and he ain't moving. And he is the player that will probably build around in years to come, and I think he'll be here for a good 6 to 8 years, provided we go in the trajectory that we're targeted to go to. So yeah, Sven Botman, player of the season so far, goal of the season so far, Alan St Maximum against Wolves.
Brilliant. Iain, come to you next, mate.
Thank God for that, because I was struggling if Matty and yourself had picked what I was going to go for. To be fair, there's loads of players for player of the season. I'll start with goal of the season, and I was torn between two, so I'll go with one, and hopefully that leaves the other one for someone. I'm going to go goal of the season, Miggy's first one against Fulham. Again, we've talked about that triangle of Trippier, Bruno and Miggy. And Miggy and Bruno, particularly in that game, just... Obviously, it helped that we're down to 10 men, but take nothing away from it. It was a great interchange between the two. Bruno with his little dinked ball over the top, and then for it to come down on a very, I wouldn't say extreme tight angle, but a very tight angle to volley it back over the keeper and score, I thought was phenomenal. And I think that was the start of Miggy's run, where he scored, I think 7 and 7 or something ridiculous. Oh no, sorry, it was the Man City. No, yeah, it was. It was that the game where he scored first to then score 7 and 7. And I think it's thoroughly deserved for him as well, simply because of the pre-season that he's had. We've always talked about Miggy always having the energy and always having the effort levels. It was just a case of he couldn't finish, and this season he's got it also. Player of the season for that reason will be Miggy Almiron. Like I say, he's always had that endeavour. I think even when we started, I think Scott might have touched on this. I think it was against Huddersfield where he hit the post. We thought we had a player on our hands, and then through mismanagement and playing possibly out of his favoured position, we didn't see the best of him. But we knew his work rate was there, and like you say, Eddie Howe likes that about his team. He likes pressing and the intensity, and he does all that. And now for him to start adding goals and assists, it's thoroughly merited. So yeah, goal of the season, Miggy's first one against Fulham, and then player of the season, Miggy Almiron.
Do you remember when Miggy scored 7 goals in pre-season and we all thought it was a fluke?
I didn't.
Can everyone remember that?
I didn't think it was a fluke.
Nah, I had him on the keep list on that video that we did. Definitely didn't sell him.
No, definitely not. No. Matty.
So I'm glad to go last because I can just sort of sit on the fence with loads of stuff. But I mean, goal of the season, it was crazy when it came to a certain point because we literally ran as if we were in our own goal of the season competition. You looked at some of the highlights, Fabian Schär's against Forest, and then we see Kieran Trippier's free kick against Man City. Now, I'm going to struggle not to pick that goal because I'm going to try and balance the scales of objectivity and being emotionally attached to a goal and how I felt when that goal went in. So that Kieran Trippier goal was absolutely fantastic and fantastic. We were lucky not to come away with 3 points that day. On the grand scheme of things, maybe a point was fair, but for me, I don't know. Miggy's goal against Leicester for me is absolutely quality because of the way Bruno Guimaraes spins out to someone, pings it over to Trippier, and does he exchange a few passes, knocks it back to Bruno Guimaraes, who then slots it into Miggy. Lovely finish. That's a great goal. But I think if I'm going to balance the scales, my favourite is Joe Willock's against Chelsea. It was one of those games where we played really well. We took it to Chelsea. We deserved to win that game, but it was just like a couple of games this season you thought, well, we're not going to be able to break the deadlock. And we did it emphatically. It was a fantastic finish. And Miggy assist as well. And that's just about my goal of the season. But, I mean, you can take your pick. I mean, the other 2 picks the lads have said, I'm not going to argue with them whatsoever. There's some absolutely fantastic goals. I'm sure we're missing a few as well. But in terms of player of the season, again, Sven Botman would be an obvious choice. The Rolls-Royce title has been banded around a lot. But he's a Rolls-Royce who doesn't mind getting a few scratches, and that's what you need. Quality and just want to dig down deep as well. Miggy Almiron, just buzzing that, we've always been behind him for the most part, There has been times where we doubted him a little bit, but that was purely because of mismanagement. We knew at the start there was a player there, but sort of had the wool pulled over our eyes through bad management, and he's been absolutely fantastic, scored some brilliant goals against like Everton and Villa and Fulham. So I might just go Miggy Almiron, but you know what, lads? I just think, just to be really nice, I'm going to go Fabian Schär, because I think Fabian Schär is not getting... there was a piece that I think was Kev... What's his name? Was it Kev Lawson? Did a bit on for the official site, and you don't realise how much he's like contributed to some of the best performances of the season. So you know what I'm gonna say. My most underrated player, and probably unsung hero is Fabian Schär, but he can share the award with Miggy for me. I know you're asked about where you think we're going to be next come the end of the season, so I'll answer that now if you don't mind, Joe.
Sure, go ahead.
The answer is I don't fucking know. I am
Perfect answer.
I'm yet to come to grips with the situation we find ourselves in. I'll be completely honest. I went on a positive tirade after the Spurs game, and Scott was lovely enough to put some nice black and white filters and emotional piano music behind it. But we're halfway through the season. We've got 38 points. It's absolutely crazy. We're 5 points clear of Spurs in 5th. Things could go sour very quickly, so I don't want to say that if we don't finish in the Champions League, it's a disappointment. It's because it isn't. We're in a semi-final of the League Cup, and if we can finish in the top 7, which hopefully that'll get you at least conference football, Europa Conference football, then that would be success. Any type of European football is a massive success, and I'm hoping that's what it's going to be. Do I think it's what it's going to be? I'm not too sure. It just all depends on how injuries are going to, impact us when we get them. But I'm going to go 6th. Don't ask me about the cup because I don't want to jinx it. But you're lucky enough to get a 6th.
I know better
out
than
of
to
me,
ask
so.
you.
Yes,
okay.
You're lucky enough to get a 6th out of me. But yes, fantastic season already nonetheless. And hopefully we just kick on and do our best. But 6th for me. But Joe, here's the question. Who's your player of the season and your goal of the season? And where do you think we're going to finish?
Actually, so I agree with Scott about the player of the season being Botman. I said this after the Arsenal game, that attacks win you games and defenses win you championships, and I am not for 1 second suggesting we're going to win the Premier League this season. That's next season's job, but this season. If you look at our goal difference, we've scored a few goals in a few games. We've spoken about it, the likes of Brentford and Villa and stuff. But the real impressive performances have come from our defence, and I'm so glad you mentioned about Fabian Schär. I did, I think it was after the Leicester game where I sort of highlighted him, and I just said. He did everything absolutely right. And the beautiful thing with good defenses is that most of the time you don't even recognize the good work that they've done because they are just in the right places at the right time. And that defense has absolutely been a brick wall this season. And massive credit to Eddie Howe and his backroom staff for that. He was criticised so much for, before he joined, saying, he can't manage a defence, can't do this, that. But that was, arguably before he went away and learned from the likes of Simeone and whatnot, and he improved his game. So it's been an absolute, privilege to watch that defence this season, and Botman has been an integral part of that. So I'm saying Sven Botman. My goal of the season, I had it between two. One of them was a technical one, and one of them was a sentimental one. You've already mentioned the technical one with Miggy's against Leicester. I agree with everything you've said. It was a nice sort of a demonstration of all the sort of inner workings that come to make the kind of goals and the teamwork that we've seen this season. The passes from Bruno, the interplay between Trippier and Miggy, and it was fantastic. For me, my goal of the season, and we're a sentimental lot, aren't we? I'm going to go for Dan Burns v Leicester.
Can't just for the
simple fact, Geordie lad, we've been wanting him to score for a long time, and to get that goal in front of the Gallowgate end, it was just really nice to see. And obviously, the weight of the goal can't be lost on us either. It put us one foot into the semi-final of the League Cup. It was absolutely tremendous. So I'm going to say Dan Burn. Where do I think we're going to finish this season? I don't really want to put a number on it in terms of where we're going to finish. I think
coward.
What we've done. Okay, all right, fine. If you want, okay, all right. If you want my honest opinion, I think we're going to finish 5th, but there is a strong hope in me that we will finish in the top 4. And one thing that really gives me that sort of hope is I trust the team to be consistent. Things could change. We could get injuries. We could get, suspensions, and we could, like you say, we could go on a bad run of form for 3 or 4 games. It happens. But if we stay consistent, as time has sort of shown to be to prove, then I think we could. I think we can and should and deserve to get top 4 if we keep these performances up. But I think anything higher than 5th would just be tremendous. As for the cups, again, don't want to jinx it too much, but the fact that we are potentially 2 games away from Wembley, I mean, it's the first time I've seen it in my living memory. It's a hell of a time to be alive for a Newcastle fan. That's all I'll say. And the brilliant thing is, we trust that this ownership is only going to send us up. The trajectory is massive, and yeah, looking forward to it. I think Iain and Scott, I don't think we've asked you about where you think we're going to finish. So
yeah, sorry, you asked me 3 questions and I forgot the last one by the end of talking.
No, it's cool. It's cool. We'll finish off asking you guys what you think.
Yeah, I'm in your boat, Joe. I think, and this is solely because, and this is probably not the best way to put this on, but the media are starting to bring us in the conversation for top 4. So I think 5th would be perfect. 4 would be an overachievement, if you're asking me, and anything less than 5th might be a little bit of a disappointment given the season we've had. Beginning of the season, I actually thought we'd finish 7th. But yeah, I'm going to go 5th, but I'd be over the moon with 4th, only because, and I've said this before, I want us to draw Ajax in the UEFA, in the Champions League, so I can go. I'm 10 minutes away from the Cruyff Arena, so I can go there and watch we play in Europe, because my first ever game was UEFA Cup, Atletico Bilbao, way back when. I think it's the same one. Decker was his first game as well. Dortmund was my United, so I want to go back to European football for Newcastle and not have to travel that far to get there. So yes, 5th, hopefully 4th. 6 would be all right though as well, I think, wouldn't it? I think we'd take anything, to be fair.
Yeah. Iain?
Well, I'm going to continue the positivity train. Like Scott said, if you had asked at the start of the season, arguably I would have said a top half finish would have been success. To think about the position that we're in at the minute, it just still seems weird because for 14, 15 years, we've just been used to absolute pessimism, absolute bare minimum. Staying in the league was a success. So it's still hard to to not think that way because it's been ingrained for over a decade. But I think given how the team playing, the sort of Eddie Howe's philosophy, how close they are, and you can see each win, like, granted Fulham's not a huge game, but the way the players were celebrating at the end of it, you can tell everyone wants to achieve the absolute maximum. I do think, given the stronger squads in the Premier League, we might drop off a little bit. So I'm going to go with a 5th place finish as well. But if you had offered that and a semi-final of a cup, potentially a final of a cup at the start of the season, I would have snapped your dick off. So I think Roger...
Please don't.
Hands off my dick.
I think Roger actually on the
Roger did,
extra time last season, literally. So if anyone wants to go back through the archives, I think it was on the season review on extra time, he said 4th. He predicted obviously the change in sort of Man United were in a transition period, Liverpool were dropping off, and he said 4th isn't beyond the realm. I would love to get 4th. I would love to be in the Champions League. But like Matty said, even if you finish 7th and you end up in the Europa Conference League, European football, it's something that you aim to achieve and then build on. But I'm going to go 5th. And I'm going to go with an EFL Cup win as well.
I stayed away from the cup purposely.
I'm putting it out
there. I do think that being knocked out the FA Cup has done us a massive favour for this semi-final.
I do.
Because we don't play the weekend where Southampton do, and then we've got them back-to-back. So we'll see what happens with that one.
We'll see.
Not counting chickens, nothing's hatching.
No.
I think we can all...
Yeah.
I just didn't want to get called a coward by Matty by not predicting anything.
Yeah, well.
Well, I think we can all agree that no matter what happens for the rest of the season, it's been incredible, and we can continue to look forward now rather than just feeling like we're staying stagnant, which is just such a nice feeling to have. Right, we'll wrap it up there, guys. So at Gallowgateshots, we do multiple videos a week, including previews, reactions, and of course the legendary Always Smiling Faces podcast. So please consider subscribing to the channel to see all of this. And if you enjoyed this video, which I'm assuming you did, if you're still here now, then please like it to help us out. Last thing I've got to say is thanks to the lads for joining me, Matty, Iain, and Scott. And I've been your host, Joe. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.